Hey, greetings everyone, a warm welcome. It's really nice to see you all again. I have been away on holiday up in the Northern Hemisphere. It has been really wonderful. I visited Croatia, Rome, one of my favourite spots, Spain, Singapore. Have had a beautiful time with wonderful weather, so I haven't been able to be uploading or able to interact particularly with YouTube at this point, but I am back home now. So I'm dealing with a little bit of a Northern Hemisphere cold, the end of that winter up there turning into summer. We did get into those really hot temperatures up to 40 degrees plus at some point around parts of Croatia and Split and Dubrovnik and Zagreb. So we were really hot a lot of the time. But we're back down here now in New Zealand in the winter and the wet. But anyhow, this is the prediction for July 2019, Earth's prediction, or using the Psi cards, which are these ones here. So July is a very potent month. Now, astrologically, it is a number 1 month. So this is all about new beginnings, new events taking place, heading in new directions, and often refers to the self. So thinking about oneself a lot as well. Now, this will be for all individuals. It will also be for countries, thinking about their needs, their directions, their issues, and especially in political agendas, I think, because there's a lot of political argy-bargy and movement going on at the moment. The other things, of course, in July are the solar eclipse. So on the 2nd of July, which is today, quite frankly, I'm doing this on the 2nd of July in New Zealand perspectives, there is a total solar eclipse in Cancer, and it is in the South American latitudes of the planet where it is most profoundly going to be felt and affected. On the 7th of July, Mercury goes retrograde. We all know about that and the energies it portends. On the 8th of July, Chiron goes retrograde in Aries. That could be quite feisty and add a lot of tempestuous energies to the scene. Then we have the 16th of July, there is a partial lunar eclipse. So I have already pulled 3 cards from the Rider-Waite tarot deck, and you see those cards before you. So I found it rather interesting that the 2 and the 3 of Wands turned up. They're consecutive cards, and they're both looking into the future. Both of them have their back turned to us. They are upright with their heads and minds squarely thinking about the future. Now, this month of July being a number 1 and being where it falls, and with the eclipses going on, there is a likelihood that we see a real big number of new directions taking place for the month. So possibly people with new concepts, ideas, not necessarily beliefs, but these could be things like new technological advances, health advances. These new advances kind of come from the feeling or the energy of the month of July, with this ecliptical energy in and the number 1. But also these 2 wand cards that turned up are really portraying some sort of expansion, ideas, passion, fire, activation, movement, global movement. So some of these are things that come forward in July might be big globally. They might affect many of us in different ways. They could involve, companies that employ people that have come up with new ideas for perhaps climate change issues, health issues, political agendas, a whole bunch of different things. Now, if we notice this card here, the 10 of Swords, he has also got his back to us as such. So we've got a lot of cards at the moment, 3 out of 3, with their backs being a major representation in the portrayal of what's going on. So I get this feeling of turning our backs on something. We are turning away from a certain perspective or dynamic or belief system or argument or philosophy or political agenda. Something in July, it feels as though we start to head in a new direction. What is it? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see how the month progresses. The 10 of Swords is a card of feeling betrayed, as though you have come down a certain path and you get to a point where someone or something, a system, a political agenda, a country, a person, a friendship, lets you down. But the card overall talks about new beginnings, new directions with new people quite often. So I'm getting the feeling with those 3 Rider-Waite cards that we're turning our back on something. There are new concepts or ideas or pathways leading us into the rest of this year, most definitely, but possibly into a whole new system or evolution of some sort as the year progresses and moves into 2020, because of the eclipse that is happening in July. Eclipses always bring out the shadow energy. They show us things that have been hidden in particular. So a lot of things can boil to the surface. Let's shuffle the side cards and see what is in store for July 2019 with these side cards. Still going. Okay. First one up. The Fool. Sometimes you might feel that you can be a fool when you have been betrayed by someone because you gave your trust to them and they have disrespected it and torn something asunder. So the Fool card, often in this particular deck for these readings, represents, interestingly enough, it can represent something pertaining to the United States in particular, and it can be a mass shooting event, and it is often heralded by someone, a young man usually, who looks a bit like the Fool. He often has a haircut reminiscent of the picture that you see there on the card. Now, it's a colleague and mine, a concept of the understanding of this card, that we've come to that conclusion that when the Fool comes out, we often see one of these type of events take place in America. I'll show you closer the view of the card. He's a bit of an odd looking guy, and he is a fool. He's often on an errand that is not worthy or not desirable or not appropriate. So unfortunately, that's something that perhaps will happen in the month of July, something to keep our eyes open for. The Fool also represents, pardon me, look, I'm having such a problem talking at the moment because I've got such a sore throat from this cold that I picked up while on holiday. I guess that's the punishment for for a month away. The Fool also represents new journeys, new directions, new desires, sometimes going off half-cocked and not being fully aware of ramifications that could be around you. And these two are the contemplative area of new directions and going off and seeking to learn and expand, and expansion. So there's a lot of expansion even in these 4 cards that are happening here. So I do feel we are heading in some really big new direction, and we're possibly at a pivotal point of something happening. I'm wondering if it has something to do with either space exploration or climate change issues, or possibly new technology. So let's see what the next card is. The Body. That's what I feel like at the moment. So the Body often represents viruses and colds and things like that. So maybe it is talking to me. When this card comes out, there can be a rising up of new viruses that hit us and take a big major impact in populations of people who are affected. We've seen the measles virus this year come out in full force, affecting a lot of different countries across the world, including America. I think New York has had a particularly bad breakout. Here in New Zealand, we've had a bad breakout of measles. That's an example for you. There's also things like swine flu, bird flu, a really bad flu season coming, perhaps for the southern hemisphere in July, so maybe a new flu strain that is quite strong. It can also represent, unfortunately, mass deaths where bodies are damaged, because this card here, if you look at it, he doesn't really have his skin on. He's down to muscle. So sometimes this can be bodies that are damaged in events where death occurs, whether it's like a burning or a crushing, or like a train or a plane or a boat where people are really badly damaged in an event. So that these two could be tying together one way or another too. So the body doesn't seem wholly in place at the point of death. There's something that happens to it, and it often relates to mass events. It especially relates to mass events in terms of things like viruses. Now, the body can also represent positivity in as much as it can be new health antidotes or new health protocols in place globally. This could be part of this new direction we are headed in. Let's see what the third one is. Liberation, freedom, and I've just talked about this feeling of freedom and new directions, and we have the Fool, which he does represent freedom in his own way. And what does liberation represent? Freedom as well. So the more and more we're digging into this, the more and more we're feeling as if there is this feeling of freedom coming. Freedom from some shackling, or freedom from ideas, or freedom from misrepresentation, or from belief systems or political agendas. Who knows exactly what it is, but there's a feeling of running in this card as well. I did forget to mention with the Fool, it can represent shaking and large quakes that affect homes or buildings, so that's a possibility. This one here, I sometimes think of Australia because of this brown snake on the ground. And there's also the people are running. They've managed to break out, break free, get away from something, and they are taking off on a horse in the background across a very swollen, fast-moving river. So this can sometimes indicate very fast flash flooding in villages or cities, sometimes in the older part of the globe, up through places like Europe, where we see the older buildings. So there could be something up there that is weather related, that creates storms or flooding. This month that we're in July, also does represent water to a degree. So I think water is going to play a role. And at the moment with us on the planet, water often means intense flooding. So this can be possibly up through the European parts. It could also be through some of the desert parts, oddly enough, of the planet, up in that sort of Middle East area, and it can represent Australia. So there could be possible floodings in Australia, or some sort of internal inland tsunami type thing going on. It could even represent a tsunami related to large quake shaking, but I'm not sure that that's the message I am getting for that card. Oh, warrior. We were just talking about mass water moving through old villages, surging through them. If you look into the back of this card, I always see that river as really running through that city and seemingly breaching its banks. So that's another message about rivers just flowing over and people running from them and them encroaching on cities or villages. I'm definitely getting a northern hemisphere feeling out of it, but Australia is represented with this card as well. The warrior is exactly that. He is a warrior. He is feisty. He can represent governments or countries that are tense or creating anxiety or making a move one way or another, a warrior type move. So warring can be increased when we have him on the scene. He is very aggressive. The tents down here, and I don't know why, but I often think of the deserts up in the Middle East. So maybe they suffer wild dust storms or fires or flooding or something going on up through the Middle East. Perhaps this tension between America and Iran is flared up along with a whole lot of other possible tensions anyhow. The wheel. The wheel often makes me think of the timing in the universe. It's like the wheel of fortune, sometimes suggesting that events that are taking place are out of our control and it's part of a bigger picture that is moving us into the new dynamics or the new perspective of where we're going. So the wheel has its own function. It's telling its own story. We can't stop it or change it. It's part of a bigger picture. But again, what do we see? Fast moving water. This is a water wheel in a very fast flowing rapid stream with old buildings behind it. So we're back again to more messages about water, water, water. What is it with this month of water? Are we going to be inundated with flooding, with storms, like big watery storms that come from the sky that create mass floods as well and damage homes and things like that? We're seeing a lot of that in these Psi cards, that's for sure. Ooh. Well, that death card often relates to mass deaths, and we've talked about that with the Fool, with the Body card, with the Warrior, because the Warrior is at war and often that means mass deaths. So there's a little bit of a message in here, given the water message, which we're getting intensely, but there's also a message in here about dying and deaths and mass deaths and warring and fighting. Because it's at night, it's a dark card, this can often suggest that things could happen at night, unexpected, and this is when it can be most perilous and we're most vulnerable at night. There is also this card up here which represents night as well. So there's a couple of messages or meanings in here that pertain to the night, feeling flattened, and very vulnerable. Both of these have a degree of vulnerability in them. It also can be pertaining to mountains and mountainous activity such as volcanoes erupting, tunnels, underground, hidden agenda, hidden messages, hidden events. It sometimes refers to the World War I and World War II because of the red poppies at the side of the card down at the front by the tombstone. So sometimes this is about commemorations and memories of the people that have already been on this planet that have lost their lives to save us, to take us to where we currently are. So there can be something in line with that, perhaps new information about either World War I or World War II, or finding out more about it, or something that comes up related to it. So the last card we will take, and we've got the wheels back again, and this is the work card. Now, right back up from these two up here, we're in the wands category, which is fire, passion, creativity, and employment and careers oftentimes, and it's about expansion. I mentioned that. So the work card as the last card has come back to careers, employment, people working for a living. So there's something in here that seems to be heading for or talking to us about change or movement. We have more wheels in here again. So that's very similar. This wheel and this wheel are very, very similar. So they're talking a couple of times, they're mentioning to us about the ever-turning presence of time and change and evolution, and that we can't stop it. It's part of the overall dynamic of life on this planet. It also represents time, as does this in many ways. So what is the reference to time here? Is it an illusionary perspective of timing or timing events, or future events or parallel dimensions? Are we talking about any of these type of issues, feelings or activities taking place? With this one, we can also look at it and think of it as an engine, a big engine like a ship's engine, or a plane or a boat or a bus or a train. So sometimes this can be referencing that those type of things may have problems with their engines, with the way they move, with the way they move people around. There could be a breakdown within them or the communication systems that rule them. So there's a possibility that we see issues to do with planes, boats, buses, trains in July as well. So it's quite an intense reading because of the Warrior and the Fool paired together, and the Body card and the Death card. They're quite strong. They're quite strong significators, if you like. I think I've made that word up. They're quite strong indicators of a fairly intense pile of things happening one way or another. So I think July is a month for us to retrospectively connect with ourselves, find that new journey that we're seeking for, understand what it is we're wanting, heading in the new direction, take the expansion, learn to grow, but to grow positively. We know we are on the cusp of moving very fast forward into new concepts in terms of climate change and what we have to do to help save the planet and the oceans in particular, and to restrict the warming of this planet. And this could also be associated with that. Well, of course, all engines on this planet create extra CO2, which is going towards the warming. And one of the most overlooked issues are planes. So, yeah, it's all about heading into the future and hopefully with positive expansion and new ideas that may be able to take us in a pathway of positivity. So thanks for joining me, everyone. I will be back starting a bit later in the week with the monthly readings for August for you all. I couldn't do the July ones because I was away in June. So for the first time in many years, I've actually missed a month out. Perhaps we weren't meant to know what was going to happen. But I will be here, as I say, later in the week to do all of the monthly predictions for each astrological sign for the month of August. So take care wherever you are in the world. Enjoy July. Enjoy this new concepts and directions that we're heading in. Stay safe and have fun. Much love, everyone. Namaste.